You certainly feel like you're traveling back in time when you watch a classic American sitcom from the 1950s and 60s. It seemed like you were witnessing an America that was more idyllic and innocent. While this might not have been accurate, it represented an America that many people long for. But somewhere along the line, even these shows became less innocent. One of the biggest culture shocks was when we saw classic sitcom couples sleep in the same bed for the first time. Join Factsverse to learn about the classic sitcom couples who were the first to sleep in the same bed. Mary, Kay and Johnny. It's likely you haven't seen this sitcom before, as it was one of the earliest ever. Actually, it was the first sitcom ever released. The show featured a married couple sleeping in a bed together. While this might have been a huge scandal in the 1940s when it was released, you have to remember few Americans owned television sets during that time. As a result, few Americans watched the show, and it didn't cause much of a stir. Before we tell you more about these classic sitcoms, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Lucy and Desi. Without a doubt, Lucy and Desi were one of the best on-screen couples of their time, perhaps all time. The show wasn't afraid to show their loving relationship, but it still had its limits. For many episodes, the writers had to find a way to subtly explain Lucy was pregnant without using the word itself. But we finally saw them in bed together in an episode called First Stop, which premiered in 1955, 4 years after the show premiered. This did cause some shock to viewers, but no harm to the show. Eventually, we got used to watching classic sitcom couples in bed, but Lucy and Desi still took a huge risk in showing a couple in bed while America was still conservative as a culture. Fred and Wilma. By the 60s, Americans were getting more used to seeing their favorite on-screen couples sleeping in bed together. Fred and Wilma from the Flintstones became one of the most popular on-screen couples to share a bed. In fact, perhaps due to the fact that this was an animated series, many Americans feel that Fred and Wilma were actually the first couple to lie in bed together. While this didn't cause much of a controversy, it must have irked a few Americans who felt it was inappropriate to see cartoon characters lying in bed together. This was, of course, generations before more explicit cartoons would reach our TV screens. Herman and Lily Munster. While on the surface, the Munsters may have looked horrific, they were indeed a loving family. Herman and Lily Munster were a loving couple and one of the early sitcom couples to sleep in the same bed. They were first shown sleeping together in the episode Autumn Crocus, which was released in 1964. Yvonne DiCarlo, who played Lily Munster, was a sex symbol, and the Munsters was a new venture in her career, bringing her attention to a new legion of fans. To these new fans, she was once again a sex symbol from the show. Herman and Lily Munster might have been an odd couple, but Americans had no problem seeing them in bed together. The Brady Bunch. The Brady Bunch was a family-friendly show that mainly focused on the kids, but of course, the story was about a couple who met up and fell in love and decided to join their families together. So it's only appropriate that there were a few romantic scenes between Mike and Carol Brady. There were quite a few scenes with them together in bed. By the mid-60s, American audiences were less prudish about seeing their favorite couples sleeping in bed together. But it wasn't because of the changing values that the Brady Bunch had so many scenes between Mike and Carol in bed together. Since labor laws don't allow children to work for too long, the show's creators had to include many long scenes featuring Mike and Carol. What's the big deal? So let's go back in time to see why it was such a big deal for sitcoms to show couples lying in bed together. By the time we saw Mike and Carol Brady in bed together, Americans had gotten over the initial shock of seeing their favorite sitcom couples together. And today, one can hardly imagine getting upset at seeing a couple sleeping in the same bed. But one has to remember American television has always had a board of overseers who governed what was appropriate for Americans to watch. Unlike cinema, which had to conform to strict censorship laws at one time, television was accessible to every American. Sitcoms especially were what many American families were watching as they gathered around the living room to eat dinner. As a result, these sitcoms were highly influential to American children and even adults. The Broadcast Standards and Practices was a governing board that had a hand in deciding what material was too risque or even obscene to show. In the Dick Van Dyke Show, Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore played married couple Rob and Laura. The show's creator, Carl Reiner, wanted to show the couple sleeping in a double bed together, as one would expect from a married couple. Yet the Broadcast Standards and Practices didn't allow this. But why? After all, we'd already seen on-screen couples lying in bed together, so why couldn't we see the same for Dick and Mary? It's because they weren't a married couple in real life, which was the case for Mary Kay and Johnny Stearns and, of course, Lucy and Desi Arnaz. Eventually, Carl Reiner relented, and the show continued without showing the couple in bed. Nevertheless, show producers would fight to show what they wanted on screen, not afraid to challenge the attitudes of the broadcast overseers. Some battles were won, others were lost, but the simple imagery of sitcom couples who were among the first to sleep in the same bed is an important part in the battle for free speech and the fight against censorship in American entertainment. While the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution protects freedom of speech, Americans have had to fight for this fundamental value throughout history. The censorship of American films and TV shows have been a small but crucial footnote in these battles. There was little censorship in American film for much of the early 20th century. There were filmmakers who weren't afraid to challenge the social attitudes of the time. Many concerned Americans were worried that this new popular medium would negatively influence the culture. Will Hayes was a politician and the Postmaster General. He later became president of the Motion Picture Association of America and created the Production Code. This code later became known as the Hayes Code. It set strict rules on what could and couldn't be shown in American film. This was intended to rid American and even foreign films of supposed obscene content that could negatively influence the population. This included showing excessive violence, nudity, sexuality, scenes of childbirth, illegal drug dealing, mocking members of the clergy, mocking the American flag, mocking other nations, mocking any religion, showing sympathy for criminals, showing rape or attempted rape scenes, mocking the institution of marriage, depicting prostitution, or one-night stands, just to name a few. The Hayes Code was eventually ended in 1968, though its influence had waned during that decade. This was replaced by the rating system, which didn't censor films, but encouraged them to cut certain content to get a more favorable rating that cinemas wouldn't hesitate to show. Even today, the FCC highly monitors what's on American television. While tastes have changed and American sitcoms of the 70s did a lot to challenge the cultural mores of the time, many TV creators have to fight to show what they wish to in their sitcoms. With independent cinema, premium TV channels, and streaming services, we now have more opportunities to create and watch content we want to. Now it's time to hear from you. What part of this story was most surprising to hear about? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content. By the way, if you haven't joined Facts First as a member yet, be sure to look below this video and click the join button. By becoming a paid member of Facts First, you'll get access to exclusive video content that you won't find anywhere else. This includes some of our more mature content that isn't suitable for public audiences, which includes topics like Hollywood actresses who posed for Playboy and some of the steamiest moments in movie history. Plus, you can enjoy these videos completely ad-free.